Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to CFB Graphs Quick Hits Week 4, I guess, Jamie. Is that what we're calling it here?
It is week 4. Just because we missed week 3 doesn't mean this isn't week 4. So
Yeah, had a little bit of travel last week. A little bit of just was on the airplane with a baby, so couldn't be here to talk ball. But hopefully your week went better than mine last week. How'd your games end up?
I did very poorly. For those that are friends with me on BetStamp, you saw me go, I think, 4-6 in my picks last week. So not the best week. Did hit on a couple really nice ones though. I think my TCU UCF over was one that I was really proud of seeing that one hit. But not a great week overall. Looking to bounce back though. Week 4's got some bangers.
Yeah, week 4 absolutely does. And yeah, again, I'm on Betstamp as well. You can find me there at Stats of War, track this. All of this is paper trading. All of this is just a way to talk about games and hypothetical. We're not condoning or actively doing any betting on this. Again, just talking about games and the feature of lines and keeping track because it helps us understand where we're hitting, where we're missing. Yeah, Jamie,
Yep.
I gave out four plays on the BetUS show last week, and I went 0-4. And honestly, if you told me Lenore Sellers was going to get hurt and Garrett Nussmeier was going to ball out, if you told me West Virginia and App State were going to have the ball and the lead in the situations that they did, and you're going to tell me TCU went up 28-7 and all they had to do was run out the ball, I thought, boom, 4-0. But as so often happens, none of that came together. And so a pretty disastrous week. I can probably say not my worst week of plays and picks, but certainly not my best one overall either. So yeah, fun to get into week 4. We don't have any prep here. I have some games that I have tracked on BetStamp. I've got some I want to talk about. We'll pull up the NCAA Insiders board. Now we have the schedule here. And Jamie, where you want to go first on the board?
Well, let's start with Friday night, a ranked Big Ten matchup in Lincoln, Nebraska. Illinois heading to the Huskers. This is a game that I'm very much looking forward to. Quarterbacks are really intriguing, I think, in this one, Parker, just because of the youth of Nebraska's quarterback and the age of Illinois' quarterback. I'm excited about this matchup, and I think that it's going to be a pretty fun show of fireworks here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the storyline here is definitely the Illinois defense versus the Nebraska offense, and what we're going to see. Illinois has been so frustrating. I know you watched that Kansas game and saw Illinois just frustrate the bejesus out of Kansas. Although we saw Kansas against UNLV, maybe that's not unique to Illinois. Maybe Kansas has some growing pains there as well. You know, certainly look. On the offensive side of the ball, last season, I've said this before and I'll say it again, Nebraska was worth negative 29 total EPA when they passed last year. On the season, negative 29. Absolute disaster class. And I think that they are just normal right there. Dylan Raiola is going to have some growing pains, but they're 16th in EPA per rush, 31st in EPA per dropback. Really, really consistent play here out of Nebraska. I like the vision. I like the Matt Rule vision. The further Matt Rule gets away from Baylor, Jamie, the more I like him and the more I respect his rebuild. And as a detour here, because we're just talking ball, remember when we were talking about, what if the Matt Rule rebuild was maybe the Joey McGuire rebuild? I recant fully. The conspiracy theory is dead. I think we can call it.
We've got hard data now that says that you and I were both very wrong on that front. So we're racking up losses right now.
Fun to entertain, and I appreciate Texas Tech Twitter for the likes and engagement on that. But yeah, I think that we can decide that's not there. Jamie, I think the story here is, Nebraska's defense has been excellent under Rule. Last season, they were top 10 in explosives allowed, both in pass and rush on defense. They're 5th in EPA per rush, 28th in EPA per dropback. They're allowing only 2.17 points per echo. Jamie, when a team gets a first down inside Nebraska's 40, they're averaging less than a field goal. That's good. I think that they are going to be able to put up a couple scores, get in a positive game state. I'm all over Nebraska here. I've seen that it's fallen to 7.5 at some places. You can get that. I locked in an 8.5 on BetStamp earlier this week. I might lock in a 7.5 again right now.
I think I'm going to lock in a 7.5 on BetStamp as soon as we get out of here as well, just because I love Nebraska's defensive line. I think they're just a bunch of animals. They get after the football. They get after the quarterback. Watching that Nebraska-Colorado game, when you have a quarterback in Shedeur Sanders who maybe isn't as mobile as other quarterbacks in the country, but is still very capable of moving around in the pocket, manipulating defenses by changing where he's throwing the ball from. He had no time. He had no time against what was a really good Nebraska defensive front. I like the Huskers a lot in this one. I'm definitely taking them plus 7.5 or minus 7.5.
Love that. Yeah, shout out to anytime we mention the Nebraska defensive line, we have to mention Hutmacher, Nebraska wrestling legend, big old hairy dude who did not shave the back hair, went out there and wrestles the heavyweight all season for the Huskers as well. Love to see that. A good Friday night. I think we agree on the direction of Nebraska here. Pulling the board, let's go back to the schedule, get into some of these Saturday games. We've got some really interesting ones. I was going to scroll and hit. I think one that I like a little bit is Minnesota and Iowa. Jamie, I'm going to go against my number here.
Okay.
You see the preview up here, I think, is undervaluing Iowa a little bit, propping up Minnesota a little bit artificially from what we've seen. And I'll give you a couple of reasons. And then if you have a take on the Big Ten West here, I'd absolutely love to hear it. Iowa's offense, these two teams are very similar. Iowa's 82nd in offense. Minnesota's 83rd. Defense for Iowa is only 44th. Defense for Minnesota is 22nd. Obviously, some of that is doing the work of opponent adjustments this early in the season. But I think the big difference here is Iowa, 8.2 percentage points of rush rate over expected. Minnesota minus 2.4 percentage points of rush rate over expected. Iowa is well equipped to defend the pass, really well equipped to take a Minnesota team that's going to try to pass a good amount and convert that into quick 3-and-outs. And then Iowa's going to be able to run the ball, kind of run that consistent offense, find Luke Lockey, and really, really roll on this. I'm not buying the new offense for Iowa, although I will say they were in the hundreds of EPA last year. They are certainly improving. And again, like I said, with Nebraska, they're just being normal, which is great. But I just don't trust Minnesota's offense. And even though Iowa's on the road here, I think I give them the coaching advantage, I give them the defensive advantage, and I give them the pace and style advantage. So I've got locked in on BetStamp, making sure I've got my number right here. Iowa minus 2.5 is the number that is currently there for Saturday. Even though my number says the opposite, I'm going to trust the Hawkeyes here. I'm going to trust the offense to be consistent and the defense to be very frustrating against the Minnesota passing attack that I just can't believe yet.
I've spent the entire time that you were talking scrolling BetStamp trying to find this game on Saturday, and I simply cannot do it. I was looking for a listing for the over and the under because I'm with you. I don't trust Minnesota's offense. I like both of the defenses in this game. I especially really like Minnesota's secondary against the Cade McNamara that I have not I don't think anybody's seen a ton from Cade McNamara quite yet at this point in his career. Your model has about 41 points in this game. I think they struggle to get to that, frankly. And I think this is maybe just kind of an old school Iowa knockdown, drag out, 17-10 style football game.
Love that. When you said old school Iowa, I immediately went 16-9. Jamie, I see under 35.5 right now.
I'm going to hit it.
Again, logging it on BetStamp. These are just paper trades, but just tracking the record. I like it. We'll lock that one in too. So I'm going to be on Iowa and the under. You're going to join me in the under there, which is a good agnostic way to say Iowa's going to be Iowa without having to worry about the spread there. Boom. All right. Where do you want to go to next?
Take me to the quote-unquote Big 12 matchup of the week. Let's go see 3-0 Utah as they prepare to get the full...
Kansas, West Virginia's not your matchup.
Sorry. You're right. It's not the 1-2 Jayhawks against the 1-2 Mountaineers. We're going to go see a quarterback duo that I believe combined age rivals you and me, Parker, with Cam Rising, if he plays, and Alan Bowman. Utah is going to get the full Stillwater experience this week. And when I say the full Stillwater experience, I don't know if they've ever been anywhere where as many people are paddling the wall in unison as you see up there at T. Boone Pickens Memorial Stadium.
Have you been
seventh-year seniors at quarterback, as our friends at 1012 Podcast say in the comments?
Some people call that a 14-year senior. Yeah, I think I saw a tweet the other day. Alan Bowman played in a game in 2018.
Yes. So here's a fun fact for you, Parker. The combined quarterback age in this game, if Cam Rising starts, is 49. The combined age of C.J. Stroud and Caleb Williams in the other night's Texans-Bears game was 44.
Jeez. Hey, glad that, with NIL, those guys can put off joining the workforce and doing this, and that's certainly fun for them. Jamie,
man,
I don't know.
At some point, LinkedIn.com comes for all of us, though.
I don't know at what point we really just decide he's not playing, Cam Rising. I think I said before the season, insofar as the Big 12 is like a smash mouth league, Utah and UCF were the best poised to win those. That two-man game with Rising and Brant Keithy is really, really interesting. We know the offensive line's solid. We know that under Whittingham, the defense is going to be solid. But Utah was a favorite. Jamie, I have Oklahoma State plus 2.5 locked in from earlier this week on BetStamp with one of those paper trades. And I have them as a 3-point favorite, even as the line has moved now and is solidly favoring Oklahoma State. What are you thinking about this game?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it really just depends on whether or not Cam Rising plays. If he doesn't play, fun fact, a freshman will be playing for Utah. He stepped in the Baylor game, and his name is escaping me right now, but his older brother is Zach Wilson, who former BYU quarterback, currently in the NFL. His younger brother is the backup quarterback here at Utah, and had a decent day against Baylor, but this is a much different Oklahoma defense than he saw a week ago. So if Cam Rising plays, I like Utah. If Cam Rising doesn't play, I like Oklahoma State. I think just because it's already Thursday afternoon, we haven't heard a ton about Cam Rising yet officially. I think I'm going to probably lock in Oklahoma State minus 2.5 and just ride with the Pokes in this one. But I can see a world in which Utah takes this game.
Don't hate that. I already have Oklahoma State as a dog here, so like there's no incentive for me to lock anything else in. I do think Oklahoma State wins this outright, but I like having the points there for sure. Mm-hmm. A couple injuries on Oklahoma State. I really think we're wondering about the Oklahoma State rushing offense. I think that's what I'm doing this season. They've had low numbers, and I think against their FCS opponent, it was like 14 missed tackles that Ollie Gordon forced, and that's just not sustainable against FBS play. They're only 33rd in EPA per rush, and they are passing a little bit more than they have in the past. So really interesting to see kind of how that matchup happens. One thing to look at this, Jamie, that I like to point out, and the colors do such a great job with this preview here. I'm not selling anything here. I just like the stuff I've made. If you look at the echo rate on offense and defense for Utah and Oklahoma State, I'll move my pointer around so you can kind of see that. 33rd for Utah. They're creating quality possessions. They're not finishing them great, right? Mm-hmm. But Oklahoma State will let you get across the 40-yard line with impunity. Last season, they really did not have – I don't know if this is progress for Oklahoma State's defense. Last season, they had one of the fewest rates of opponent plays in their own territory on defense of anybody in the nation, but they were giving up these crazy explosive touchdowns. This season, looks like they're not giving up those explosives as much. Look at the points per echo, only 1.93, but they're giving up a higher rate of quality possession. That might be growth for the Oklahoma State defense. Even as that echo rate goes down, they might be playing better defense. So a little bit of a paradox there. Really, really interesting to see how that drive efficiency is sustainable or not.
Is this the definition of bend, don't break?
I think so. I think last year they were very much break, just don't bend but break. And this year it does look like they're doing a little better. The Nardu hire is very interesting to me, and just the whole thing about Mike Gundy is that the way that you think his team is going to win, he knows that and he wants to win differently. And so that's really interesting. The strategies that they've taken there. Overall, I'm really interested to see what they can do. It does feel like Oklahoma State has some new life, Jamie, because they should have lost that Arkansas game. Like very, very clearly, Arkansas just, golly, man, just couldn't do anything there. But yeah, a really fun one to watch. Also note that even as Oklahoma State, Ollie Gordon should be a really strong presence for them. Teams have rushed against Utah really, really a lot this season, 9.9 percentage points more than average. So Utah's been tested in the run game already and held up pretty well, 49th in EPA per rush. That's a matchup I'll definitely be watching on that side of the ball. But this is a whole lot of fun. Let's keep moving through the board. Where do you want to go next?
Take me to, let's see, do we want to do Iron Skillet?
Iron Skillet's right here, TCU, SMU. Jamie, first, dispel the notions. Can you just, on the record, if you don't want to do this, you can say no. TCU wants this game to continue. Am I correct? Even before SMU joined the Power Five.
Yeah, I think in some sense they do. I think when you look at the era of college football that we're in currently, where the demand and the pressure is on schools to just strictly make as much money as possible, a home and home with the team that is no longer a big draw is a challenge, especially when you're trying to get multiple non-conference home games every single year. Jeremiah Donati is on the record as saying he wants to get to a point where TCU has at least 7 home games every year. This year they only have 6, and their only non-conference home game was their FCS opponent in Long Island. That's just unacceptable if you're aspiring to be the type of football program that TCU aspires to be. They do want to play SMU. They don't want the Iron Skillet to completely go away. But there's also an understanding, I think, from TCU's standpoint that in order to keep SMU on the schedule, even if it's not every year, the structure of the rivalry needs to change a little bit. SMU obviously is less inclined to give in to TCU's request to make it a 2-for-1 or always in Fort Worth, and I can't blame them for that. But the general narrative that TCU is pushing pause because they want to big time SMU, I think, is a little bit unfair to TCU and misrepresents the actual situation.
Yeah, and on the flip side, if the roles were reversed, I have a lot less trouble believing that the SMU administration would cut this game similarly
100%.
and if not more aggressively. So a little bit of a power imbalance there. An interesting matchup. I'm actually on TCU here. I have them by 4.5 on the road. I think the concern for SMU would be like, when they've beaten TCU, it is TCU's run defense has been bad. This season, it's actually been the pass defense that has struggled, even as they got ran the heck over by UCF. Some of that was volume, some of that was game state, but UCF passed pretty well as well. SMU's run offense is just not great. Their offense at all is not great. They're putting Jennings back there because they don't trust the offensive line. They can't let Stone sit in the pocket and cook. And the run game's 86 in EPA per play. SMU, terrible at finishing drives. They're actually getting across the 40 pretty well. We saw that in the Nevada game, but that's when, those athletes matter more. The front seven matters more when you kind of compress the field and have to operate. And without being able to let Preston Stone go through his reads, they're really playing a lot more kind of incoherent football, I think is the way I'd say it. Yeah. So that points per quality possession number really worries me. I think they'll move the ball in the open field against TCU. A scrambling quarterback could do a lot of damage against this TCU defense, but I think overall the SMU offense is just nowhere near potent enough to make me back them in any way, shape, or form. Additionally, the SMU defense is not what it was. Last season, they were a legitimate defensive team. That front is really good, but I feel like it's underwhelmed against bad competition this year. And TCU's offense, we can talk about this more in the text message. It seems like there is more support from the coaching staff on the direction and execution of the offense, and that's yielding some dividends on points per quality possession. For instance, Josh Hoover is doing everything you could ask and more out of a 3-star guy kind of thrust into this role and helping them a lot. They've got some really interesting matchups at wide receiver. A healthy Jack Beck is really hard to deal with. And I think all signs point to TCU just winning a little bit of a boring game here. In the fact that they can move the ball well, SMU can't, and TCU's defense, isn't looking great on the numbers, but I think the underlying metrics aren't as bad as one might suggest.
I think the thing to watch here, specifically when TCU is on offense, is right now what you've got them listed at on your matchup preview here. 3rd and 4th down success, TCU's 6th in the country, and a large part of that is because of a guy you've already talked about, and that's Josh Hoover. TCU in that UCF game found themselves behind schedule pretty frequently. The difference in the outcome between the first half and the second half was that in the first half, Josh Hoover made a ton of plays in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 to get some of those first downs. You mentioned Jack Besh. He had a monster game. He was always out there finding his way open. Savion Williams had a very good game as well in the passing game. In the third and 4th quarters, though, UCF changed up their defensive scheming just a little bit and made it a little bit more challenging for Josh Hoover to complete some of those 3rd and longs. We saw TCU's success offensively from a points perspective drop off a little bit. And I think a large part of that is because UCF has some really talented guys defensively. I don't think SMU has the horses to maybe do some of those same things against TCU's passing game that would make this game really challenging for the Horned Frogs. I'm with you. I like the challenge. I like the Frogs to win. Kind of a boring game here. I don't know if they get all the way to 58 like your projected total says. Yeah, BYU beat SMU in Dallas. And that's really more an indictment on SMU than it is a compliment to BYU, I think, just having watched most of that game.
Although that rat slip speed option on 3rd down to seal the game was so freaking dirty. They hadn't called it all
beautiful.
Day. That's going to end up being one of my favorite plays of the season so far. Just them lining up, running the speed option to the short side and getting the first when they needed it. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'll say, I think 2 points on TCU, Jamie, just because I don't talk about them publicly very much with other commitments. The 2 things. One, if I just laid out Savion Williams, Jack Besh, JP Richardson, and McAllister woke up a little against, had a touchdown against UCF. is anybody? I mean, that's comparable with a lot of Power Four teams in terms of
Yeah.
quality, 1 to 4, and options there. Not to mention Drake Dabney at tight end, I think, is a weapon that TCU can continue to use well. So that's going to present some matchup issues for an SMU team that's 60th in EPA per dropback. Also about TCU's defensive numbers, if they manage the clock a little better, run the ball a tiny bit better, there's a whole set of plays that in protection that late game protection that we don't observe that probably don't drag down TCU's EPA per dropback to 84th this season. So I think there's some selection issues as well, and kind of what we observed that might be bringing down those defensive numbers a little bit as well. Obviously, you want to get those tops, but having to be in those positions wasn't necessarily the fault of TCU's defense there. So yeah, I'm on the Frogs here. I like them as a favorite on the road. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Where are we at on time? We're at 20. I think we can get 2 or 3 more games. Let's keep rolling.
Let's do it.
You want to do the other Big 12 matchup of the week? This doesn't have to be a Big 12 show, but I'm not going to let me use that, and then we'll talk about Tennessee, Oklahoma, probably to get the SEO going. Kansas. Okay, Jamie. Here's the thing. I think it's very possible. One, West Virginia had the ball, needed a drive, just couldn't string together a drive. Probably should have beaten Pitt. Didn't get absolutely torched. Didn't play amazingly on defense. The secondary is not amazing. 129th in EPA per dropback. Kansas hasn't looked great this season. Part of that is because they have a different offensive coordinator and they're not able to scheme things open as well. Part of that is the development, like with a full offseason of Kotelnicki, in addition to his play calling abilities, you imagine Jalen Daniels takes a step forward. I kind of had an inkling that like Kansas could just walk in and win this game pretty handily here, except for Jeff Grimes' comments this week about they haven't found rock bottom. That makes me very nervous from a standpoint of maybe they don't have a good sense of what's not working. And it's week 4, man. Like that makes me very nervous about Kansas or backing them. So that would be my lean here, but I'm nervous about that.
I really can't get a read. I feel a lot of West Virginia this year already. I watched pretty much Kansas' entire loss to Illinois and UNLV in full. And I'm just baffled by the inefficiency of Jalen Daniels with the ball in his hands, both passing and running. I don't know if he's still banged up from last season. I don't know if, the comfort blanket of Jason Bean not being there anymore is having an impact. I am not witnessing the same quarterback that we saw when we saw a healthy Jalen Daniels early in last season. And I mean, Grimes is right to an extent because, as you love to say, Parker, there is no such thing as rock bottom. And so you can just keep plummeting forever if you're really into it. But I think this is an opportunity for Kansas to maybe simplify, get back to the things that they found success with last year, especially when Daniels was in the game. And this is a West Virginia team that you suffer a loss like that on the road against a rival. It can be hard to bounce back when you've got the conference grind coming up immediately after. So I'll be interested to see how Garrett Green responds. He didn't have a particularly good day against Pitt. I have not seen a ton of growth and development from him so far this season over last season. And I was admittedly maybe a little bit too high on the Mountaineers coming into this year. So I'm going to go with Kansas. It's not my most confident pick of the week, but I'm going to go with the Jayhawks to win this game.
I like that there. And again, yeah, you've got, maybe a money line situation there for a little paper trade. Yeah, I think I don't know that I want to do the Garrett Green rant here, and that's okay. I think
we can hold it. Let's hold it for another week.
Is that like Garrett Green doesn't have to be an amazing quarterback for West Virginia to be good. And I just still don't think he's clearing the bar of what they need out of him. One thing to note that is interesting, Kansas historically has been really good on early downs. Kind of when the field is open, we can motion Lawrence Arnold into a weird position and kind of attack you. They haven't done that well this season, 83rd in EPA per play, but West Virginia is 126 in EPA per play on early down. So again, some opportunities for them to maybe use some of the stuff Kotelnicki drew up and schemed to great success against West Virginia there. So certainly interesting. I think that's the right side, even as I am nervous just about what's going on internally at Kansas. Let's go to the big one. Let's go to Tennessee, Oklahoma.
Is this really the big one?
What is the other big one? I
mean, USC Michigan, I guess, would be the other big one.
We'll get to that one too. This could be one-sided. I'm on the Vols. I have them by 12 here. I think the offense is absolutely legit. My friend Keegan Renault is talking about, marginal points of sample or of schedule adjustment against Oklahoma and Tennessee and all that. And I think the difference is like, let's put the stats aside. We'll talk about it here. If I'm just betting like coach and quarterback in a game that I'm pretty sure is going to be an offensive shootout, who is going to be more equipped to do that? Very, very clearly Tennessee here, right?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, first of all, let's talk on the field play. Nico has looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the country through the first quarter of the season. I love
So
what I've seen from
satisfying to see
him.
a dude take the reins and look
Just
good. Like, love it.
grab the bull by the horns, and he has not let up off the gas a single moment so far. It's been a blast. On the other side, Jackson Arnold, as talented as he is, has struggled pretty significantly against lower competition. So I'm curious to see what he does against a Tennessee pass rush. By the way, the Tennessee blitzes. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. Tennessee does not blitz a ton, but they are,
They
I
don't
believe,
have.
they don't have to because
James
they have
Pierce is
such a
good.
good defensive line that they still create pressure more often than not, just rushing for. I'm very curious to see how that plays out in this game. And then let's talk about the off the field storyline, Parker. We're 10 years removed from Josh Heupel, Oklahoma alum, getting fired as the Oklahoma offensive coordinator.
And
And,
not even getting fired because of performance. Like, their offense was okay. It was fine. It was like, I have to do something, and I'm not going to
yes.
fire my brother. Like, he
Yep.
was that makes it worse. I think if he had been bad, it would have been better to stomach and be like, okay, I've got to learn, I've got to improve. He went to Missouri, he met up with Joe Don Finley, like, he got the playbook. He's improved and innovated, and that's been great. But the fact that it was just almost entirely a political move, I think adds some fuel to this fire.
I think it makes the cut even deeper, right? I mean, you're talking about his alma mater, a coach that he's loved and respected. That feels like the ultimate betrayal, and now he has an opportunity to roll into Norman, and it probably has one of the best Tennessee teams in a long time to send a real big message. I think this is going to be Tennessee, and I don't think it's going to be particularly close.
I totally agree. That's the side I am on. I will say, in Jackson Arnold's defense, he's young and he's growing. I love that he's slinging it. I think people over-index on the bowl game from last year where he threw some picks, just trying to make something happen in limited playing time with Gabriel gone. I do think there's a couple things that could have gone differently, and we would be talking differently about him. What sticks out in my mind is last week. Do you recall? I don't know how intimately you watched Oklahoma Tulane, but Denzel Burke ran a route in the end zone and just went out of bounds. Like, didn't ever really get back in
Yeah,
bounds. And
yeah,
Arnold threw an absolute dot that Burke caught, but it was not legal, not in field of play, where you're like, oh, okay, this kid can put the ball pretty. He could place the ball pretty well. So
yeah.
I don't think I'm writing off Arnold by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that if Tennessee can turn this into a track meet like I think they can, I'm all over the Volunteers here.
I agree with you, and yeah, this is what I said earlier was not a commentary on Jackson Arnold's overall talent. I think he's incredibly talented. He was a 5-star kid for a reason. I just don't think Tennessee is the team you get right against, especially right now.
Yep, that is very true. And Oklahoma has a hard schedule, like we've talked about. They do have the highest, when I calculated this preseason, the highest Vegas win total average of their SEC opponents. So it is going to be a grind. Oklahoma fans need to keep those expectations in check just because of how difficult the schedule is. Let's do USC Michigan, Jamie. We're at 28 minutes. We're cruising here. Let's talk a little bit about this. I think that USC is the right side, but I'm going to give you my vision for Michigan, and then I want you to talk me down.
Okay.
Okay, so one, Michigan, complete disaster not building this roster for Alex Orji and not starting him and not committing to that. That makes me very worried. Like, that's, again, all those signs are there. When I talk about Michigan, though, I talk about a defense that is going to be extremely ferocious. I think we've seen LSU's defense is not exactly as fierce as they had hoped this season with getting Baker from Missouri, and USC was able to move the ball really well. Where LSU really fell short on the offensive side of things, they were fine explosiveness, and Michigan doesn't necessarily have that, but they could not run the ball to save their lives. Like, their run blocking is just so poor against the USC front. That's good, not great, I think, is where I'm at on them right now. Michigan, 27th in EPA per rush. They're going to start the rushing quarterback, have that mobile threat there. They don't really have that outside explosive receiver like they've had the last couple of years, but they do have Colston Loveland, who if he's healthy, latest I've seen, there's a little bit of doubt of that, is leading the team in targets. They can scheme him open. They can play consistent football, drag the pace of this down, and potentially get USC into the mud. That's the vision for Michigan this week. Jamie, I don't know. I can see that path does theoretically exist. If I had to attach a probability to that, it would be way less than my 36% win probability here.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I mean, looking at this game, and I said this when we talked to Texas, Michigan a couple weeks ago. Michigan is in that weird space where they have probably 3 first-round picks on the defensive side of the football, and then just some guys for the other 8. And that really concerns me when you're talking about a secondary against a quarterback that has shown he can sling the ball. I've been really impressed with Miller Moss through the first third of the season. And they've got some wide receivers that have been capable of getting open. Lake McCree has had a really good start to the year. Jacoby Lane has had a decent start to the year as well. These are guys that I think are going to be capable of getting open against Michigan. If Miller Moss has time, I think he gets into a rhythm. And frankly, I think we could see kind of a lower scoring version of what Texas did to Michigan a couple of weeks ago. I just don't think Michigan has the juice this year that they've had in years past to contend with some of the better teams in the country and in their conference. And that's not, I mean, it's all on a sliding scale, right? Like Michigan is still incredibly talented. They've got phenomenal coaches. They've got a great recruiting staff. They've got everything that you could possibly want. But recruiting is still cyclical, and they are on the downside of that recruiting cycle right now, where they're trying to build some things back up. And I totally agree. Going away from Alex Orji for the last 2 weeks of fall camp, and because the other guy had a great 2 weeks, and then you all of a sudden he's not the starter, it was a horrible mismanagement by Sharon Moore. I think he's trying to correct that now. What the lasting damages will be, we don't know yet. But I think it's a good sign that he was aware enough to correct the mistake right now, rather than just let it play out until you're, God forbid, like 4-4 or something like that. But we'll see. I just don't think Michigan has enough offensively to keep up with teams that are capable of throwing the ball around a little bit.
Definitely agree. 2 points on that for me. One, you just limit the live reps that Orji didn't get. Like if your concern is that he's inconsistent, you want him to have live reps. Throwing him into the grinder against Texas, probably not great, but still live reps as the starter are undefeated in developing a quarterback. Secondly, if I'm looking at Michigan, if Michigan goes 8-4 this season after losing all of that, including their coach, like amazing. That's still a fine season. Like their floor is very high. They can rebuild and continue to get elite talent and continue to tinker. The third thing I'll note, look at the starting field position for Michigan this season. It's limited sample size, but 119th on defense, 109th on offense. That suggests, some coaching and defense that they had a longer leash last year that they just absolutely are not going to have this season, which is, that's kind of cracks in the foundation stuff of, we got to fix that, even as our efficiency numbers aren't, terrible. We need to fix that. Starting, letting your opponent start basically on their own 30 and still being 23rd in drop back rate and rushing, like that's very good, but it is you're set up for failure there. So I do think USC is the right side. I'm going to lock that in on a paper trade as well on BetStamp there. And Jamie, we just hit 32 minutes. I feel like that's just cruising. That went by really quickly. We want to keep this true to its name. We do want to call this quick hits and have it be quick. Always enjoy talking ball with you, Jamie. People can find you on Twitter at Frog Preacher. They can find you on the Frogs Insider podcast, which is passing all sorts of subscriber numbers and doing some great work over there covering TCU. On BetStamp, are you Frog Preacher as well?
Yes, I am.
I should write that down to remember that. That's good. Brand consistency. Same for me. Twitter at Stats of War and BetStamp at Stats of War as well. Enjoy talking ball with you, and we will be back next week.
Always a pleasure, Parker.